to Procurement Says No, Episode 8. Hello, Eduardo.
Hello, Rich. It's a snowy wonderland outside my house.
Oh, lovely, lovely. And welcome to all our listeners from all around the world for the truly global procurement podcast, Procurement Says No. And today we have got the usual fare. We have the news. We have Ask Rich and Ed. And we have the welcome return of our special guest star, Mark Sherwood-Edwards, who's going to talk more stuff about legal. And we did have a couple of comments on Linked Up saying, Mark was really good. He should have his own podcast, which I thought was a bit outrageous. We invite him on and people are saying he should have his own.
Procurement says no to that one, Rich. No podcast for whoever he was.
But we will be welcoming him back in just a little while. Right. So, in the news.
We've got some exciting news because we've got this dashboard of where our podcast goes. So, UK, 65, 70% of our global audience, but there are some very interesting countries listening to our podcast. For example, Vietnam, Indonesia, Romania, Nicaragua, of course, where we're now slumped to number 34 in the chart. A bit disappointing. Yeah, Kenya listening. It's like a virus. It's gone global. 35 countries around the world listening.
Procurement Says No, the new global coronavirus spreading around the world.
Nice one. Yeah. Apologies to anybody who's affected adversely by coronavirus at this point. But
there you go.
Yeah, even Ukraine. People seem to not listen to podcasts, particularly at the weekends.
Oh, when do they listen to them, Ed?
Tuesday's the big day. Yeah, during work time, Tuesdays, and then followed by Wednesday and Monday, listening to our velvet tones while working. And that's inspiring them to work harder and more productively.
It could well be that. I think it probably will be that.
Really?
Right, here's some other news. This is bizarre, this story. This is from Ben Unglesby, senior reporter at Supply Chain Dive. US balloon supplier files for bankruptcy. Balloon manufacturer Anagram filed for bankruptcy this month amid uncertainty around its supply agreement with its corporate owner, the retailer Party City. The retailer is by far the supplier's largest customer. Party City accounts for 38% of Anagram's sales, who also sell to distributors, value retailers and mass merchants, including Walmart. Party City filed for Chapter 11 earlier this year, though it didn't include the Anagram subsidiaries. In May, Party City moved to cancel the supply contract with Anagram through the Chapter 11 process. Anagram's chief restructuring officer, said the move has put additional pressure on Anagram's operation and its own restructuring negotiations. Under the original contract, Party City would have had to pay $40 million in termination fees if it backed out of the supply agreement, which dates back to 2020. In Anagram's press release announcing its redundancy, the company said it continues to support Party City as a valued retail partner. In 2021, Anagram's revenue went through considerable growth, while its operating profit more than tripled. The lion's share of Anagram's products today are designed as helium balloons, a business that became financially vulnerable amid helium shortages in recent years. What sort of crazy story is that?
That is utterly bizarre, Rich. That's
So we'll go bust and go into bankruptcy, and we'll leave one of our divisions out of bankruptcy, and then we'll cancel our contract with them in order that they go into bankruptcy, but cleverly avoid a $40 million fee with their own subsidiary. What?
I bet you there's somebody sitting in the background making a lot of money out of that situation.
Yes, I think there probably is. So any other news from you, Ed?
Yeah, I've got a few little snippets. I've talked about this before, that CAPS, Centre for Advanced Procurement Studies or Purchasing Studies, this will link into that episode that we keep on talking about recording but have never recorded, around jobs and procurement people and recruitment and all that sort of stuff. So CAPS have just released a little survey talking to the reasons that sourcing and procurement employees voluntarily leave their company. The number one reason was limited career growth opportunities, which is a topic in itself, really. Quite often people struggle to branch out away from procurement or maybe into supply chain, but not into other areas of the business. So second is non-competitive compensation, age old that is really. And then the third one was personal and family reasons. Yep. Probably no surprises for listeners there, perhaps.
Oh, I'd have thought hate your boss would have been up there, actually.
Yeah, that's quite surprising, isn't it, really? No, hate the boss. But maybe that's limited career growth opportunities. Perhaps that's a euphemism for I hate my boss.
No, hate the boss. Also in Supply Chain Dive, Whirlpool on track to reduce $800 million in costs via procurement tactics. This is from Alessandra Salgado, staff reporter. The home appliance company adopted procurement-based strategies to mitigate risk of supplier-driven disruptions in 2021. For dual sourcing, the company assessed geopolitical instability, natural disasters, and supplier-related issues. Evaluating these issues provided the company with insight on its vulnerabilities and where dual sourcing could be beneficial. SVP of Global Strategic Sourcing, Alessandro Lombardi, said, "We know that reducing parts complexity can lead to cost savings, streamlined operations, and improved product quality." The company also collaborated with its supply partners to explore ways in reducing manufacturing complexity. Brilliant.
It all goes full circle, doesn't it? I read some stuff a couple of years back of global supply chains and a move away from sourcing at great distance and bringing stuff in more locally. And the second, dual sourcing scenarios where you have a source near to you in country and then an offshore source or nearshore source. So if you're in the US, that might be Mexico. For the UK, for example, that would be some in the UK and maybe some in somewhere like Slovakia or Eastern European countries where the labour rates are lower.
She sources near sources by the near source. Any other news?
This is also from CAPS recently, just around payment terms, which is always a hoary old topic, I think. 11% of their membership put their suppliers on 90 days.
That's reasonable, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, so I think in the UK we've got a small business sort of payment terms policy that the government have got as a sort of voluntary code of conduct that targets 30 days and less. But only 36% of suppliers had 30 days. Everybody else was 45 days up to 90 days.
Wow, I'm surprised about that. That's, gosh.
I always think about this because I've got a small business myself, is that big multinationals typically do this to small businesses and it only comes back at them in greater cost in reality because cash is expensive. Capital liquidity is expensive for smaller businesses. So I do question really a lot of the time whether it's really appropriate and whether it's cost effective.
Yeah.
I think it's better in the public sector generally. Most public sector organisations pay quickly, don't they, I think? But
yeah,
so there was a couple of bits from CAPS. I like CAPS. They're one of those bodies that it's worth just subscribing to and just seeing some of the figures that come out. They come out with quite interesting stuff.
Not as interesting as the Cheetah Institute, though, I don't think.
No, I think the Cheetah Institute is the world's best, isn't it?
It is. Now it's time for Ask Rich and Ed with more questions from listeners around the world, especially in Vietnam.
Yes.
So here's our first question. Is it okay, Ed, to accept gifts, e.g. wine, from my suppliers? And that's from Veronique Dupont from Fontainebleau in France.
In a word. Yes! No. It's oui.
Oui.
No.
C'est bon.
No. It's never acceptable to accept wine from your suppliers. Much as we would like to, and much as I might have done at the early part of my career, it's a breach of integrity and probably a breach of your code of conduct if you've got one. So, no.
And there, ladies and gentlemen listening around the world, is the first incorrect answer from Ed. Because the correct answer is, of course, yes, always, but not on a regular basis.
Yeah.
We've talked about ethics previously on this podcast, and we agreed that it is definitely a county in the southeast of England.
Yes, exactly. Right, another one for you, Rich. So this is from Maria Sanchez in Guadalajara in Mexico. Should I be worried about AI eliminating procurement tasks and procurement as a career path in the next 5 years?
Well, that depends if it's generative AI or just standard AI, Eduardo. No, I don't think panic just yet. And I think our friendly business billionaires also disagree on this one. Infosys founder Narayana Murthy's advice to youngsters in India was forget AI, urging them to work 70 hours a week. Whereas lovely Elon Musk, brackets who we should get on, says we should all get used to lots of free time. So two completely opposing views. And of course they said that in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the noughties, blah, blah, blah. We'll all get more time off. Robots, bots, AI bots will take over. But I think we'll all work until we drop down dead, Ed.
Yeah.
And those under 30 will never be able to afford to retire.
In many Western countries, the retirement age has been pushed up. That's so that those little gains you got on working less hours have been taken up by working for many more years. So it all equals out, doesn't it? No. One last question. Do Rich or Ed know of any good jokes about procurement? And that's from Ernst Muller in Dusseldorf in Germany.
And the answer to this one is no. Not one joke. The funniest thing about procurement is procurement says no.
Way! That's us.
There is a procurement cartoon called Procurement Bert, although the name is a bit wonky. It should be Procure Bert, as it's supposed to be a skit on Dilbert.
Yeah.
Dilbert is funny. Procurement Bert is, well, maybe they should work with us and we could make it super funny.
No, I saw that and just passed over it.
So there you are then.
Yeah.
Nothing funny in procurement.
I don't think so.
Except for Procurement Says No.
Yes. We're dead funny.
And now it's time to welcome back our special guest star and expert barista. It's Mark Sherwood-Edwards. Welcome, Mark. Hello.
Hello. Glad. I'm very honoured to be invited back.
Can you imagine being asked back for another episode? Who knew? So last time we talked about some basic legal principles. This time we're going to talk a little more about how procurement and legal work together, and specifically we're going to talk about SaaS contracts. So Eduardo, do you want to kick off?
I'm just a bit disappointed you didn't mention that Mark's a barista.
Oh yes, sorry, yes, just waiting in the green room there. Mark has made us both a beautiful cup of coffee.
Yeah, there's cappuccino, it has sprinkles and everything.
Yeah, well, it took me a long time to roast those beans, so I hope you enjoyed them.
I think you could be on every episode, Mark.
I think maybe we could start, Rich, with just asking about procurement and procurement's understanding of the law. So, Mark, so what do you think of the procurement folk that you've come across? Do you think that procurement teams, people get and understand the law?
The law?
And contracting?
On the whole, yes. I mean, I think most of them are focused on just getting the deal, right, on the price. I'm much more, actually, what's in the price, what risks are included, all that kind of stuff. Some areas, it doesn't make that much difference if you're buying widgets and stuff. But for some things, which is more intellectually property-ish, what you actually get for your money is much more of a variable than it would be with a widget. The definitional contract side can be quite important.
Yeah. And how do you think the legal function, if you like, in a business should be organised with regard to procurement? Because I've seen all ends of it. Some businesses I've seen where the procurement people to pass over every contract to the legal function, and the procurement people just sort of pay no heed of what's in the contract because they think they can hand it off to somebody else. And then in other business, I've seen it where basically you perhaps just got a company secretary. Then there might be one legal voice in the business, and it's all left to procurement. I know it's going to be horses for courses. But what are your thoughts on the sort of optimal play?
Right. Here's the problem, right? Legal is very risk averse by training. They probably say, oh, right, procurement, you can handle contracts below a certain level that are involvement, but they set the level quite low, 50K, right? The net result is that your procurement resource gets tied up on low value contracts. They don't spend their time on high value contracts. So the opportunity cost is huge on the kind of misallocation of resources. The problem also comes that the way that lawyers are trained is, if you remember kind of quadrant diagram between an axis, which is urgent on one and important on the other, lawyers always go to the urgent. Whatever people ask me, I'll do that next, even if it's not the most important. So putting in place a really efficient, intelligent contract legal process for procurement, taking a step back, if you're a buyer, the buyer side risk is very low. If you're selling parts to a factory, you deliver the parts that are defective, the factory goes down, and let's say you sell the parts for 100 quid. the factory goes down for 2 weeks, you're liable for those we discussed last time. You're liable for the damages. You haven't got limitation liability, you're liable for all the damages. If you're a buyer, generally speaking, your only obligation is to pay the money. Let's say your same deal, your obligation is to pay 100 quid. You didn't pay 100 quid. That's a debt. There's no damages claim. Your obligation is to pay 100 quid. So you don't have this unlimited, no stop loss kind of liability. Your liability is just to pay the price. Maybe a bit of interest, maybe cost recovery. Provided all you're doing is buying and you're not promising to do other things in the contract, actually it's pretty low risk. What should be happening is legal should be more proactively doing stuff. A lot of lawyers are not really interested in the business of the business. What they're interested in is acquisitions, raising funds or whatever. But actually, that's not the business of the business, right? The business of the business is selling and procuring. For some reason, what lawyers consider glamorous and attracted to is those things which aren't really part of the business, like buying and selling companies.
More strategic things.
Yeah, well, whether they're strategic or not, you get a less intelligent business than it should be because...
But I guess the buying of widgets is less interesting.
Yeah.
Where do you think that balance is between procurement and legal? Is it typically a good relationship?
I would say it's polite but not very healthy. I think the procurement got over respect for legal in some ways, right? Because in the end, legal is just another service supplier.
I think procurement people look on legal people as really clever and stuff, and there may be some procurement people who be a little bit intimidated when procurement people. I don't know what Rich thinks here, but I think when you're talking to lawyers, particularly early in my career, you are a bit intimidated because these clever people, very logical. You're a bit cautious in dealing with lawyers, I think. I don't know what you think, Rich.
You see, Ed's always had that problem, whereas I haven't had that problem, Mark. So that's obviously an Ed thing. So moving swiftly on, next question. Have you ever had a circumstance where you've given what you thought was really great advice, which was then largely ignored, and then that led to major problems?
No. And I don't know it's because I haven't given spectacularly good advice or whatever, but mainly people have followed.
They listen to you, yeah.
Yeah, I'm part of it. So, I mean, I've worked a lot with procurement, but also with CEOs and so on. One of the things that, if you're talking you guys will know the C-level people, which you clearly are, you can't give them too many things to worry about, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that lawyers do say, well, there's 20 issues in the contract. You can't go to CEO and say that. You can say, look, 2 issues, and this is how we're going to fix them. And then they say, okay, I can live with that.
Ed introduced you as a pragmatic legal person, and maybe that's why people have listened to you. I've had examples with an in-house legal team that was so spectacularly risk-averse that it just wasn't worth asking them because you always knew you were going to get the most ridiculously risk-averse answer. You don't get out of bed, don't leave the house, you might die. And that led to a lack of credibility, I thought.
Absolutely. But also the thing is, there's 2 different situations. There's a startup and existing business, right? A startup, you don't know what your risk profile is because you haven't been there. Once a business has been established for 3 years, 5 years, you know what your risk profile is. You've been in business, 20 years. So look at the last 3 years, 5 years. What's gone wrong? What's bitten you in the bum? And that's your risk profile. And if nothing's gone wrong, then relax a bit, right? It's not that risky. You're not in that riskier business unless there's a tectonic shift or some sort. But in the normal scheme of things, then you're not that much at risk.
Which sort of brings us on to SaaS contracts, on-demand software contracts. Bearing in mind a lot of the companies in this space are US.
Yeah.
One is, do procurement people get it? And how do you get round, the Microsofts of this world and others, Oracles, and who just force their terms down your throat with no negotiation? What are your thoughts there in terms of how you deal with that?
Well, you can't with Microsoft and Google and that lot. You don't even bother to try. I mean, if I was representing Microsoft and deal with Google, I probably would negotiate. But for most people, just don't bother. It's just not worth the time. It's hard enough working out what their contracts say because most of them are built in kind of layers online, right? So you have to kind of follow the rabbit trail till you get all the documents to make up the contract. But if you're dealing with more people who are more that you can negotiate with, if you're UK based and your operations are in the UK, there's an argument for saying, well, actually, if it's a SaaS contract, it should be subject to the law of England and Wales, because actually that's where everything is happening. And sometimes with some big American companies, you might have to concede it's subject to the law of California or subject to the law of Delaware, right? But it just comes into, if you're doing this really sensibly, it's a price point. How does it affect the margin I price my margin a certain amount of risk. I'm now increasing my risk by going to the courts of Delaware. How much am I increasing my risk? Do I need to do anything about it? But sometimes you just have to concede that and just look for other protections. If it's a SaaS contract and you're based in the UK and the customers in America using courts of Delaware, they could probably sue you in the courts of Delaware if they wanted to, right? But to actually enforce it, unless you've got assets in Delaware, it would be bloody hard for them. And actually, if they're a SaaS buyer, they're really at risk. Forget law, pure risk thing. You can switch off the service to them at any point.
Have you seen much litigation in that space? Because that's what I wonder about sometimes with the Googles, Microsofts, whether it really ever goes to court or whether the service just gets stopped. If you fall out with Microsoft over something, do they actually come and sue you? And do they sue you under the English legal system, if it's in England, to get their money?
There's no way unless you've got a lot of money, you can sustain litigation with someone with Microsoft. To be blunt, and I have been involved in it once.
Yeah.
I was working for a company which bought another company, which is a VAR reseller, and had been setting up a number of its customers who are now our customers with a Microsoft license. It turns out they were counterfeit. So Microsoft rocks up and says, you've been using this stuff, reselling this stuff, it's counterfeit, you owe this amount of money. Well, it's very hard for you to establish whether it's counterfeit or not. You're on this big machine, a very well-oiled, very tough machine that Microsoft has. The ultimate sanction stroke threat they have is, we'll go to your customers and tell them that you gave them counterfeit Microsoft stuff. So in the end, you just have to pony up, and there's no real way around it. But have I seen much litigation in the SaaS world? Not yet. And remember, SaaS is a bit closer to services than normal software licensing, and people tend not to sue each other so much. That's a gross exaggeration in services, particularly if the match spends what you consume. If you put 20 million up front and you don't get any services back, then you will sue. If you're spending matches what you're receiving, so you're never really out of pocket, then actually if you get pissed off with your supplier, you tend to stop using them, and that's it.
Yeah, but for components, when I worked at ICL as a buyer at the beginning of my career, we had made a conscious decision not to contract. We just had price lists. And the view was we'd never sue each other.
I mean, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I just certainly would have saved a lot of money on contract negotiation costs and the time wasted. There would have been a contract, right? It's just not written down, right? It's a bit like, contract's a bit like insurance, right? You have to make your mind, is it worth paying this particular insurance premium or not?
Just in terms of SaaS contracts, what's the right duration for a SaaS contract, do you think, Mark?
Yeah, really good question. I think, and this is the buyer view and the seller view is very different, right? The seller view, particularly if you've got investors, they want long-term contract because investors love annuity revenue. Oh yeah, 5 years, 5 years, 7 years, we can get away with it. If you're a buyer, you're thinking, well, you should be thinking, well, actually, what are their setup costs here, right? The nature of SaaS is the setup costs are marginal, right? The cost of each new customer is trivial, setting some parameters, and that's about it. And therefore, the seller is breaking even within 6 months easily. I kind of think, why does anybody sign up for a 3-year SaaS contract or a 5-year SaaS contract? It makes no sense. I'm not sure it makes any sense from the seller's point of view either, because typical outsourcing contract, say minimum 5 years, 7 years. Right up to signed contract, everyone's on the best behavior. You sign up 12 months, a honeymoon phase. Then you get the kind of 3 to 4 years of neglect. Then you see, oh my God, the renewal's coming up. Then you go back into the honeymoon phase, and it's too late, right? And the buyer's pissed off and never do business with you again. I think locking people in, customers in, is very dangerous for the culture in a company. I think you might be better off, I know this is a bit not commonly held view, better off saying, Mr. Customer, you've got to commit for 12 months, whatever. After that, you can walk whenever you want, because we provide such good service that you'll never want to leave us.
I agree with you, Mark. I think that cultural piece around the level of service you provide and how much you innovate the service over time has a major play. But most corporates don't get it. They think revenue, must have a long-term deal. To your point, if you just said you can cancel me at a week's notice at any point, you're always on your mettle. You'll always give a good service and you'll think about innovating it, but it doesn't fit the strictures of the way in which businesses operate with certainty around revenue. When SaaS was first came through, the concept was you just sign up on demand, basically, I think, for a lot of services. Most software companies work, even though they say it's SaaS, it's minimum 12 months, isn't it?
Do you get the general sense, Mark, that procurement people understand how to use the buyer's negotiating power in some of these things?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And this is really quick. This is 3 phases of the contract. There's from you've never heard of the supplier up till they're the preferred vendor. Then there's a signed contract, and then there's post-contract. So up to preferred vendor phase 1, preferred vendor to signed contract phase 2, and signed contract then that is phase 3. All your negotiating power as a buyer is in the first phase. As soon as someone is a preferred vendor, you've lost all your negotiating power. I'm presenting it as like a one-off, but actually that drift from we're talking to them to preferred vendor can happen over 3 months. And as a buyer, it becomes increasingly hard to walk away from. Public sector procurement does its best. They just say, here's a contract, it's on these terms or it's not. And I think more buyers should be doing that. So you've pre-negotiated everything. Makes your life. You've pre-negotiated everything at the point where you got maximum negotiating power.
So to that point, Mark, I think this is where a lot of procurement folk get it wrong, in my experience, is that they don't tender the contract terms. So what happens is you tender the quality, the service, what the product is, etc. You tender the pricing piece and the price breaks and however that shapes up. They leave the legal agreement till afterwards. At which point,
too late. Yeah, it's too late.
You have to tender the key contractual clauses. Always put the terms in the front.
It's a double whammy, right? Because I reckon the drop-off from pre-preferred vendor to preferred vendor negotiating power is from 100% to about 20, 25%. It's a huge drop-off. You're going to have to negotiate this stuff anyway. In terms of time spent, if you negotiate it when you've got 100% negotiated power, they'll just say yes to about everything, and it'll be quite quick. If you do it when you've lost negotiated power, they won't say yes to everything and be quite slow. So you've got to go through the same hoops. Just to make it in mind, do you want to take this fast, advantageous route, or you want to take the slow, least advantageous route?
So that's a tick in the box for public procurement. First time ever. Best practice. Doing the legals up front. So we have one last question for you, Mark, which is from one of our avid listeners, a guy called Gary Mander, who I think is from EY, and he would like to understand your view on AI products entering the legal space. More of a threat or an opportunity?
I tell you, I saw the latest ChatGPT thing. Get all your documentation, maybe you wrote a book, you feed it into the ChatGPT, and then let's say your book is education for teenagers, right? And then you've got an app which answers your questions at education and teenagers.
Woohoo!
Will it make a difference? Probably yes. I mean, AI is already doing stuff at a big scale. Like if you've got 1,000 documents to read, right, you feed it to the AI machine, right, and it does it in a couple of hours, and it's maybe more accurate, less accurate than humans. Humans get bored and make mistakes doing boring stuff. In terms of judgment of things, I'm not sure AI is quite there yet. In terms of negotiation of stuff, I'm not sure I think I'd use AI, because just getting the input into a live negotiation from AI would be quite hard. I'm giving the same answer that anybody in the kind of professional services knowledge worker would kind of give you, where you could see there's things where it's going to help, but you don't quite know to what extent and how much.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about that before. If AI was negotiating with AI, it would either be a fantastic result or it would be Armageddon. We can't predict which one it would be. Ed?
The sky would be on fire.
Indeed.
Yes. I have the same thought about AI. We were talking in our previous episode, Rich, about generative AI, which is a sort of creative end. But my concern in contract negotiation or price negotiation, or broader procurement negotiation, is I struggle a bit with how two computers would duel, how they would fight it out. Wouldn't they just get to a complete compromise, regardless of scale and power? Whereas typically in procurement negotiation, if you're buying and you're the bigger organisation, you know the supplier wants it more.
We're missing the power play, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that will get built in. Maybe we just don't understand AI well enough, I think. I certainly see a lot of power in what Mark mentioned about contract lifecycle management solutions in the legal field and in the procurement field, and they sort of overlap in many respects, where it allows you to build contracts and analyse contracts and compare them, because then you almost get to like a contract factory, don't you? Sometimes glancing through all of the contract, your point about not reading it in detail, think about the key clauses and what you want, and then having a look at it, is that you get an appreciation of the whole document. Whereas when you've got a CLM looking at it and redlining things, does that mean you lose the bigger picture and you're just looking at the minutiae?
Well, I think it's something we talked about the previous episode about the wood from the trees, understanding what's important to you in the contract, what the important bits are. You can have contracts where you actually, as you develop them, you're picking from clauses, right? And that means that the reporting about each contract is much more effective. It's because it's done in real time, and I think those can add a lot of value. The short answer is you can see stuff be useful. You're not quite sure how much or how far yet.
Yeah. It's not road tested, is it? I think.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mark, for all that insight. Probably the most informative Procurement Says No so far. So thanks again.
Well,
how can you say that after all our ramblings in previous ones? I think they've been highly informative, Rich.
Oh, I think this one's an award winner, Ed. And for our listeners, how do they get in touch with you, Mark?
You can find me on LinkedIn or Clearview Legal. Send me an email at msc@Clearview Legal. If interested in SaaS stuff, then go to contractology.ai. I'm putting together some online courses. You can register and I'll let you know when they're up and running.
Yeah. And one last question, Mark. Legal Eagle or Legal Beagle?
Can we leave that to the AI to work out?
Thanks again, Mark.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Excellent.
So, next time, Ed, what are we going to talk about next time in episode 9?
I've long been an admirer of Peter Smith since he worked at Spend Matters, and now he runs Procurement with Purpose. I think it'd be great to get Peter to come on.
Yeah, good idea. He does that Procurement with Purpose and the bad buying stuff.
Yeah, bad buying, that was it. Yeah, so I think you should talk about bad buying. And I understand he's lecturing at some European universities on bad buying, which is quite an interesting development. So I think they're sitting up. And then I think, as well as Peter, I think we'll get Elon Musk.
I'm with Elon that we shouldn't have advertisers. And we also said we'd try and get Tim Cook as well. So Peter Smith, Elon Musk and Tim Cook, we'll try and get them for episode 9. It may well end up just being Peter Smith.
I think we get the triumvirate onto the show. I think they'll be dead keen given how popular we are in Vietnam.
Thanks again for listening to episode 8. We'll see you all next time.
Excellent. You know, you realise you're in the wrong job. You know, you've spent your life in procurement, mate, but you're really good at this stuff. You should have been in TV or something.
Rubbish, isn't it? Too late.
Script writing, mixing with lovies, going to gala events at Leicester Square and all that. And instead, you're sitting in your home in the north of England doing this.
This is my dream. So, welcome to Procurement Says No, episode 9. Hello, Eduardo.
It's episode 8.
Oh, shit. Right.